will we be here to hold the space and create resonance for the next step up in the process of standing in Rakhma. You know, our conversation yesterday was focused around this idea from the ancient Aramaic of Rakhma, and it's such a profound piece of the puzzle. It was actually a story that I came across, and recognizing this state, and that it's something that creates this pristine condition for the mind to generate its perceptions, and recognizing that perception has a quality. Rakhma gives it the highest quality possible. It's kind of like an antivirus program. It keeps your computer on track. It inoculates against errors. So Rakhma does to the human mind, and there's actually research that shows that throughout the general population, people tend to develop prejudices based on negative information and be attracted to that more than the positive, which was kind of, I thought, interesting, in that Rakhma is what keeps us on track there. So there's a cute story that I came across that I'd like to share, and it fits perfectly with your comments, Suze. So a man of 92 years, short, very well presented, takes great care of his appearance, is moving into an old people's home today. His wife of 70 years has recently passed, and he's obligated to leave his home. After waiting several hours in the retirement home lobby, he gently smiles as he's told that his room is ready. As he slowly walks to the elevator using his cane, the assistant describes his small room to him, including the curtain for the window. I like it very much, he says, with the enthusiasm of an 8-year-old boy who's just been given a new puppy. Mr. Todd, you haven't even seen the room yet. Hang on a moment, we're almost there. Mr. Todd replies, that has nothing to do with it. Happiness is something I choose in advance. Whether or not I like the room does not depend on the furniture, the decor, but rather it depends on how I choose to see it.
That's perfect.
It's already decided in my mind that I like my room. It's a decision I take every morning when I wake up. And this is basically, I hear this man describing that his practice is to set Rakhma on a regular basis. He says, I can choose. I can spend my day in bed enumerating all the difficulties that I have with the parts of my body that no longer work well, or I can get up and give thanks to heaven for those parts that are still in working order. Every day is a gift. And as long as I can open my eyes, I will focus on the new day and all the happy memories that I have built up over my life. Old age is like a bank account. You withdraw it in later life, what you've deposited along the way. So the advice to you is deposit all the happiness you can bring to your bank account of memories. Rakhma, it's exactly what we've been talking about with the Beatitudes, and that idea of the first law was to maintain this condition of mind. It had nothing to do with loving neighbor. It was to recognize and start to make a practice of maintaining this condition in your mind so that you stayed connected to the presence of love. And then to have the first beatitude we spoke about yesterday, the Greeks speak of, is blessed are the poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And Aramaic says the Creator implants in your mind neural structures which will guide you when they are active. If they are inactive, you who follow these instructions will come into conscious possession of and be able to use this latent guidance system designed to make available thoughts and actions that will increase your happiness and well-being. So the instruction set, the first one, which we covered yesterday with Mark, is you who have a home to forces from the Creator. Yours is, and it was translated as a heavenly estate. The Greeks translated the kingdom of heaven, but it really says yours is the community of love. And when we start looking at these Beatitudes, they're so profoundly powerful at, oftentimes I've run into and heard, especially when we're working with children, people in the culture will say, well, you've got to let your children make their own decisions, their own choices, and, you can't control. Well, that's true, you can't control them, but you can help them to build brain cells and understand the principles by which their own body-mind units work. And when they do, they're going to be able to operate this body-mind unit as it was designed to be operated. And the people in the culture out there saying, oh, you've got to let them do their own thing, are there vying to control them and build into their minds what they want built into the kids' minds. So it's powerful to just know that there's a set of principles by which this mind operates well, and always gives the most intelligent possible response when we keep moving, and it's a process. I think back in my life, and it's taken years to step one step at a time toward moving in this direction, and still slip sometimes. So I'm with you on that, young lady.
Yeah,
and Mark is with us.
Okay, go ahead. Because I want to hear yesterday's, so I'd like to hear what's going on. Thank you. Blessings.
All right, young lady. Thank you. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hey, how are you both and all?
We're rocking. How about you, sir?
I am as well. Great to be back with you.
Oh, good. Yeah, glad to have you back. We just had a brief conversation about Rakhma and maintaining that condition in the mind, and so we were right in the middle of a conversation about your son yesterday when the show closed off, came to an end. So I'd just turn the floor over to you and see what else you have to share with what you went through. You had been at the point where you'd said you were quizzing your son on whether or not he might be in error about his conclusion that life would be easier if he weren't here. How did that complete with him, and how's he doing today?
So that conversation was, it was one of the real turning points, for him, in I think just his recognition of what he wants. And just to refresh for anyone who wasn't here yesterday, my then, he was 11 or 12-year-old son was talking about taking his own life, and so wife brought it to my attention. He and I sat down. I said, "Hey, what's your thought on this?" And he reinforced it and said that he thought everything would be better. And when I dove deeper into it and said, "Well, what if you're wrong? What if you have this opportunity to actually process through whatever's going on here and live fully here? And if you did, go to wherever he thought he was going to go, that you'd have to the same work." And it just kind of, had him pause for a moment to reflect that, wait, so it means I might have to do this anyway? Like it may not go away? So he thought about it overnight, and I think it was the next day was Saturday, I believe, and he caught me coming around the corner. He's like, "Hey, Dad, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "I just wanted you to know I decided to stay." And at the time, though I don't have the emotion at this moment, at the time, there was so much emotion for me in this acknowledgement that we have our sovereign right to choose. And he didn't have to, right? And I know situations like that can turn a lot of different directions. He could have, in another home, been brought to a doctor or, diagnosed with something or, all kinds of things, put in a hospital. But in the matter of, a few short hours, with love present and the willingness to be in the conversation, which honestly, Dr. Tim had taught me, like, hey, if someone's talking about suicidal thoughts, like, talk to them about it. Don't be afraid of it.
Embrace it. Yep.
And he made that conclusion on his own, like, okay, I'll stay. I'm here. And He's doing very well. He's a teenager. He's 16 now, and he's about to get his driver's license, and going through all the things teenage boys go through. He's such a loving human being, a gentle soul. So it's really nice to see people make that choice, and I think that can be the case for a lot of people who are struggling. Just to have a conversation, to open up, like why? When I had suicidal thoughts, I was afraid I was going to hurt people, and I thought it would be better if I wasn't here. But it didn't mean that I shouldn't be here, right? And it certainly wasn't the case I didn't want to be here. And so there's a real opening, that can be had, when we can maintain our presence of love without drawing all kinds of conclusions and projecting, into the future and doing the things that can amplify that energy. In this case, and it's just one case, but in this case, dismantled it very quickly.
Powerful. What a gift. Yeah, suicidal ideation, one of the things that they've shown in some research is that people who have a traumatic experience, and, they label it PTSD. I don't think the D is really belongs in post-traumatic stress. I think it's just post-traumatic stress. It's the system's natural way of handling and trying to protect itself. But 10 times as many successful suicides come out of people who've had that post-traumatic stress type of syndrome. And, that might be something to, quiz him on. Was there something, you're aware of something that he went through that was traumatic? He saw something or what have you that maybe he still might need some support in processing. And, of course, you ask the same question of yourself, because that's oftentimes a major factor in suicidal ideation.
I'll do that.
Yeah. Cool.
I certainly know that I had stress.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you tie it back to, and words are such a key part of the whole process. If you look back at the power person dynamic from the codependence work, that oftentimes, the way that regulatory speech works is we first hear speech, then we repeat the speech out loud, then we repeat the speech silently to ourselves, and if we repeat the speech silently to ourselves, and we experience that, the behaviors associated with that speech as reducing stress, then it goes into the regulatory speech system, which to a great degree determines behavior and, of course, language. And so oftentimes there's a power person dynamic involved, and the power person was somebody who had more power over your life than you did at some point. It's usually a child, though not necessarily. That person was not functioning as love. And when the object of that situation perceives the situation as survival, then it's like the gates are opened on their whole energy field, and literally like a sponge, they just suck in every energy from the environment. And if that's never opened and dealt with, and in the future, when stress is elevated to extreme levels, then that power person dynamic comes back into play, and there are really only 3 levels of behavior possible for an individual. And it doesn't matter whether it's 2 years later, 20 years later, or 80 years later. When there's no stress, the automatic decision system runs the game, and we'll do whatever we did to get along with our power person. When stress starts to build, we'll do whatever we did to resist and survive with our power person. And when we become ultra-stressed, we'll do to our power person did to us that we hated the most. And so the child who hears certain speech, and they're in that kind of stress situation, it can be a powerful governing force if it's never reckoned with, if it's never opened and forgiven.
That actually ties nicely also into the second Beatitude.
Yes. Let's look at the second Beatitude. So the first word of each of the Beatitudes, tuvehun, and I'll repeat that. The Creator implanted in your mind neural structures which will guide you when they are active. If they are inactive, you who follow these instructions will come into conscious possession of and be able to use this latent guidance system designed to make available thoughts and actions that will increase your happiness and well-being. And it's you who, and I would, if I were translating it now, if I were doing that work, I would change the word love in this translation. So we've got you who love truth. We would change that now to honor truth, because our whole culture, if you listen to Vladimir Lenin, he says, if you want to destroy a culture, just change the meaning of its words. And we've been given this definition of love that it's a verb, it's something to do, rather than who and what we are. And if we're functioning out of that definition, one of the first things that happens as young people come into the world, if you hold a newborn child and you tap into the essence of that newborn, then that essence, if we've asked thousands of people all over the globe, everybody's answer is always some variation on the theme of love. And then I ask people, well, now, is that newborn loving you, or is that newborn love? And everybody says, well, it's obvious, the newborn is love. So then when we use love as a verb, we set the mind on a pathway towards something it can never achieve. It's going to be frustrated and blocked in that possibility when we realize who we are. So I would change that word now from who love truth, who honor truth, and profess your errors and the errors of your society, that we need to look into the thought structures that are based in hostility and fear. So this is the second step in making ready a mind to be available for the full and complete expression of the being that we are as love. And what this Beatitude finishes with, behind each of the Beatitudes there's a promise. The first one was, yours will be, you will live in the kingdom of, or the state of love. And the second one is, you'll be freed of mental stress. And, the condition of the culture, by and large, is blockage of truth. And blockage of truth looks like this. I have a 9-bit mind. Perception goes into this 9-bit space. And my mind generates, especially if there's hostility and fear, a perceptual construct based in hostility or fear. And every perceptual construct based in hostility or fear is a lie. But if we call our lie the truth, we filled that 9-bit space of perception with a lie, called it truth. Now there's no room for truth to get in. So it's not until we honor truth that I keep hearing a banging in the background, sweetie. Can you mute whatever that is that's doing that? So when we're in blockage of truth by calling our lies truth, then there's no room for truth to get into that little 9-bit space. So the willingness to honor truth always puts us into alignment with what's going on in the actuality. And when we're in alignment, my take is that when we're in alignment with truth, people oftentimes say, well, what is truth? My take is that truth is what is in the actuality. And if we don't have a different idea that blocks that out, it will come in and correct everything in us that's off base. So the result would be we'd be freed of mental stress, as Yeshua said 2,000 years ago in this Beatitude. Your thoughts?
It's right on, and just for reference for people, just to in case they don't have it on the top of their mind, the second Beatitude in the English was, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." And you addressed the Aramaic extremely well. And one of the things that I mentioned yesterday is I've also gone back just to look to see, well, what did the Greeks say about it? And the Greeks use a word, I think it's pronounced pentheo, though I don't know Greek, so I may be mispronouncing it. And in looking at pentheo, it matches what you're saying. Pentheo, it talks of an outer expression of pain that can't be hidden. So it's properly grieve over a death, as an example. But one of my favorite parts of this is in researching it, someone said it's really about coming to divine closure. And in order for something to come to that divine closure, to have that, really be fully healed, if you will, there is this allowing that which was hidden, right? That which wasn't, brought forth, as you mentioned, with the truth. When it is brought forth to the surface, then that pain has an opportunity to be expressed, and that a pain has an opportunity to truly heal and be resolved in the individual. And the powerful part of number 2 here is, just like 1 and 2 and 3, these are to be repeated, right? It comes in layers, as you've talked about before, that there's what's up is up, and allowing that to be there, allow what was hidden to be exposed and breathe into that, letting the hidden hurts and pains and the grief and the shame or whatever it is come forward in that space of love. And that promise of being comforted is so true. There's a peace that comes with this process consistently, every time.
There's an element missing from the Greek where they say, blessed are those mourning their wrongs. The element that's missing is that there's got to be the willingness to honor truth. We hear lots of people who mourn their wrongs so publicly on the news and in their speeches, and they're always whining about what's been done to them and how they're such victims and all of that. And the element that's missing from the Greek piece of the puzzle there is I totally missed this. The focus is in Aramaic is that the focus is on truth, the ability to honor truth, to be the space where truth is allowed to show up in the mind. And when people live in blockage of truth, what happens when truth shows up is their stress skyrockets. And that stress attaches to one of 2 things. It either attaches to getting rid of the source of the information that's delivering truth. The classic example of that is John the Baptist. He brought information to the king and queen that they were not interested in hearing. Their stress went up, and literally she had his head removed. And I always like to kind of tongue-in-cheek say, if you're going to play John the Baptist for somebody, if you're going to bring truth where people are in blockage of truth, there are 2 skills that John hadn't developed that you really want to make sure you got, and that is you got to know when to duck and when to hold the mirror up so that people realize the stress they're experiencing is their own. And until one honors truth, they'll tend to attach their elevated stress to the outside world. The alternative to that is that we can, when we recognize truth is showing up, I've got a new level of stress coming up, I can attach that to self-correction rather than attack. I don't have to puke on somebody else. I don't have to criticize, condemn, blame somebody else. I can shift that into, here, my stress level's up. That's the truth. This is mine. I have work to do. And so I attach my stress to self-correction, and by honoring truth, when, something painful or traumatic, something that appears to cause my pain or trauma shows up, then I can shift that out of cause and start to process my pain and trauma. Oftentimes people say, well, this event was so terrible, it caused me all this pain. And the truth is, nobody's ever been pained about anything that's ever happened in their lives. Ever, about anything. I mean, shy of a punch in the nose, okay, so there's some physiological pain. But otherwise, when people say, you hurt me, you upset me, you disturbed me, that's all a pure fantasy and a lie of the mind. If somebody's in pain, they're never in pain about something. They're in pain because there's pain in them. And if they live this beatitude, then because that event happened, they'll have the opportunity to heal that pain, and they'll stand as a connected space of love, maintaining Rakhma, and clean up the pain part, perhaps right down to including their genetics.
That's
it.
My
Makes
lived
sense for you?
experience with it too. Yeah. And it ties really nicely with just to share a lived experience for me as I was navigating the mind energy, if you will, the carbon-based mind of all these distortions, what would occur for me is I would consistently go to the breath. I mean, there was definitely a retraining that needed to happen for me to go to the breath and allow those active forces of God to really come into my life, right? That Beatitude 1. And then what my experience had been is if I had what I call a charge, where there's a charge of frequency that's from hostility and fear, etc. If there's a charge there, then that's contributing to blocking this truth. And so the willingness in that clear space that opens up from Beatitude 1, it's that willingness to say, okay, I'm okay allowing this to occur. I'm okay allowing. And I actually, not sure if I'm the only one who's done this. I doubt it. But I'm kidding because I know it's not true. But I had blocked certain emotions. I was under the misperception that certain emotions were not acceptable to feel. Anger was one, which is a big deal. You know, if I'm thinking that I can't feel, then what happens is that charge would build, and then kind of overflow when it got too much for me to carry, or it was just too much. So part of the healing process for me was to actually go through a feeling wheel, which you can get on Google, and look at each of the emotions, like, hey, what does this feel like? You know, what does surprise feel like? What is anger? What is fear? What do all these feelings feel like? And one of the things that I noticed as I first did that exercise is I couldn't distinguish certain feelings. Like, I couldn't feel certain things.
Right.
So then I went through an exercise of saying, I allow myself to feel anger. And then the anger would come up, right? And I just gently start to see, okay, what is this? And I breathe through it. I'm like, okay, well, that's anger. Well, how is that different than fear then? Because I lumped some stuff together. And so just to reorient was a really critical part. Not that that's necessarily what Beatitude 2 is exactly saying, but in order to free ourselves of the lies and allow truth to really surface, this charge that's blocking the way needed to come up. So mine in this example was a hidden anger, that I denied. And once I started to move into acceptance, it was probably a 6 to 8 month process, because it kept evolving. It kept just with anger, I'm saying, it kept evolving. It's like it felt one way in the beginning, and then there would be moments where it started to, I would say, mature. And instead of feeling it at a really high level or too low of a level, it eventually got to a place where I recognized it when it was coming up, and I could acknowledge that, okay, this is anger. What's happening? Is there an expectation that's being missed, or what is it? And allow that truth to come out by accepting that the emotion was okay.
Right. If you look at that Beatitude, actually, you just described precisely what the Beatitude says. Profess your errors and the errors of your society. What are the thought disorders? And oftentimes, what I hear you say is, with the anger as an example, not allowed. That's oftentimes a power person message. And power person's allowed it, but you're not. And that's a really fertile ground for worksheets to clear that out of that power person, the false self that's based in the power person. When we talked yesterday about Yeshua saying, in order for you to live, you've got to die. The self that's got to die is the false image in the mind based in the power person dynamic. And it's the source of pained perception and stress that carries pain. And when we start to be willing to look at those errors, hold to honoring truth, hold the space for all of that to come up, that's when resolution occurs, and bingo, you're free to mental stress. It's just gone. It's like here's how it works, folks. He wrote it down 2,000 years ago. Well, he didn't write it down, but that's what he was giving us 2,000 years ago. The brilliance of the understanding is just...
and it opens the door to new perception. You know, I mean, it just opens the door to, it's like, oh, I 10 minutes ago might have thought one thing, but once this is cleared out, it's like, okay, now we move to Beatitude 3, where we let go of attachment to things being the way that we thought they should, or that, you know, whatever that piece is, but to let go and to say, okay, I'm allowing new information, and I'm going to allow this to be different than the way I perceived it. And it's been remarkable to see how quickly, and part of it's acceptance, because one of the things that I learned was there's a right answer, right? I was trained in school. I went to traditional private school, and just, okay, you get an A or a B or a C or whatever. So one of the things that I discovered in this, it's like, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to not have the quote-unquote right answer. And the more I released what it is I thought I knew, the more I would say, the more I was open to seeing with new eyes and experiencing that particular moment. And then the next step was realizing that it's okay for that one to change. You know, there was a little time where I felt like, wait, well, now I have the new awareness, so now I'm right. It's like, no, not necessarily, because there could be another wave, another layer. Right? It's fully recognizing just all we have is right now, you know, this moment. And so you mentioned the story yesterday about teaching for 27 hours without a thought, and that's it. It's like, if you can stay in that present moment, then you're not trying to bring forward something from some past where you had kind of gotten it. You can allow for the fresh perspective, you know, that fresh insight to flow to whoever it is that you're speaking with in that moment, for that group at that time.
And the answer might be different tomorrow. And what you just described, Mark, is exactly why in the worksheet, you know, the core of each worksheet is where you identify and cancel a goal. But then if you remember, over on the right-hand side in the margin, I cancel my need to be right. I cancel my need to make up another reality based on this errored perception. And each worksheet, that's like an integral part of it. And to me, that's part of is part of honoring truth and allowing literally the energy of the actuality to flood in and shift everything in me. You know, when we recognize that perception is nothing but a construct of the mind, and if something is in the mind and then turned into perception, obviously, whatever it is, it's from the past. And so when we live in what the world would call normal perception, we're literally engaging in the past again and again and again. You know, it's the essence of my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And Yeshua said, of those who are doing that, you know, let the dead bury the dead, let the blind lead the blind. It's like, you know, you don't want to live there. And this part of honoring truth and then being able to look into our areas of thought, the areas of our society, clearing out these stressors that are held from the past, is there's correction in carbon-based memory. And from that point forward, everything that comes forward from carbon-based memory to formulate our perception is at least accurate about the actuality, but it's still not the actuality. And the next level is where perception comes directly from being rather than from carbon-based memory. And all kinds of new information becomes available as we allow that to open, and it becomes enlightened perception coming from, you know, to give a mechanical metaphor, coming from above rather than below, rather from the past. It comes from the actual present. And it's, you know, beyond any kind of comprehension or explanation. It's just something you got to do for yourself and experience.
Yeah, and it's easy to experience by just doing the work.
It's what it
on
takes.
whatever's in front of you.
Yep.
And I love the in the beginning, when I remember first, meeting you and in 2012 coming to the Why Again workshop, there was, you may recall this, there was just this desire, like, let's should go faster, and over time, I've really matured into the appreciation of the particular insight and opportunity that's here. But in the beginning, I was chasing because I wanted so desperately to be healthy. And I would...
Everybody wants to storm the gates.
Yeah.
But you can't storm the gates. You just got to go through your process. Yeah.
Well,
I want this yesterday.
Right, and it's like you can't plant a seed in the ground and expect to pull the apple off the tree in a week. It takes time. There's things that have to happen. And there's a process of transforming us, through those active, the active presence of God, kind of transforming our nature into that nature, and that is going to take time. It's not like it suddenly got skewed overnight. We're talking about generations of
massive
that we have embodied through the current generations. And if the previous generations didn't clean it up, then we can either hide from it as long as we want to hide from it, or we can say, you know what, I'll do this. I'll clean up what's going on in me and for my generations. And when someone makes that choice, it's a foregone conclusion because the willingness is there. So all the resources are going to show up. They're going to show up in the form that's best for that person to receive these insights. And there's such a gift.
As are all the things that they're going to have to face and deal with going to start showing up. That's the other side where a lot of people shy away. It's like, well, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. I don't want to deal with this. But when you realize that the major attribute of this body-mind unit, the atom, Adamos, the red clay, is this multi-generational database that is so huge. I mean, its major attribute is inertia. It's moving in a particular direction at a particular rate of speed, and it's going to take some pretty strong forces to change its direction, and that's the process of healing, to literally, when you look at that word repent, the Greeks have abused that word so terribly, repent, you sinner, as opposed to, it simply means to turn your thinking, your mind in another direction. So rather than looking to this multi-generational database and its appearances, its perceptual constructs from the past, that we literally turn and embrace what comes from directly from the mind of love, directly from the mind of the Creator. And that's our birthright, to have our perceptions come from there. And, again, each of these Beatitudes is the instruction set for how to clean up the multi-generational database. What's required? What are the principles behind it?
And it's so interesting, to be having this conversation, because we're in a time when so much out in the world is being, brought forward. Essentially, the things that have been hidden, are being exposed. And one of the opportunities that our society has is to accept and embrace, like, oh, this is great. Like another hidden, crappy thing that got twisted gets to be exposed. Like, let's celebrate and let's do our work on it. And we can do it individually. We can do it, I think, as a group. What I've seen is it can be even more magnified, when we're dealing with these, larger outer things. But when I first began exploring kind of the inner journey, and I think this might be a common thing, my whole focus was, we've got to fix it out there, right? We've got to fix this problem in the world. Over time, and this was prior to even my 2011 manic episode, but that helped me see, wait, I can't do anything of value out there until I actually have what's going on in here cleared up. So
exactly.
it became obvious to me that like the only work to do is to be on in terms of our optimal state. And if we're not in our optimal state, we're off, then we have these tools to apply and get into that on state. And what happens later in the Beatitudes is we begin to be moved out into the world, begin to overflow with that love, and we begin to be reframed in terms of where we place our attention, like what we do in the world. It becomes this, I would call it the divine plan, and we start contributing in our way to what we're called to do there, but it's in a real pure space. And even then, there's no finish, because even as we're inspired with our divine plan, yours being, to bring this work to every heart, mind, and being on the planet, then you're going to have to face the things that might be in the way of that plan being fulfilled. So you're going to have to go through a process of really cleaning up every last vestige of fear. And then
Absolutely.
Even if you do a great job at that, guess what? Not everyone's going to like what you're doing. And so they're going to come possibly and most likely, according to the Beatitudes, they're going to, start to project upon a person who's carrying that out because it's conflicting with the way that they have wanted it. And that could be in a home, right, with a spouse when you're changing. It could be a family member. It could be out in the world with your company or your job. It could be on a massive scale, with large implications. And so if we can do this work and support people finding this work, we have an opportunity to then have those people inspired in their line of work, and suddenly you have people all over the planet who are these beings of light, of love in their jobs, in their roles, in their communiques, and there's an opportunity for massive transformation. But it doesn't happen by going out and saying, hey, let's massively, change everything today. Let's support people in doing the work as you've done over the last, so many decades, to have, people like me and others who have said, hey, I'm willing to do this. This is what it is, and people on this call as well, this is what it is that is the primary purpose of my life. And anything after that is going to come out of that. That
Definitely
shifts
key.
careers. That shifts lives.
Everything, yep, for sure. Well, and that takes us into the next Beatitude, where the promised result, in Aramaic the word is nartun, is gain the earth. This is where you bring it into manifestation in the world. So the next Beatitude says, you who have humility. Now, of course, the Greeks mistranslate that word, as with most of every other important word. And so humility has been used as, groveling the earth like a worm. But in Aramaic, the definition of humility, and this is what this Beatitude says, is to have that, is it's a mental quality of perceiving and cooperating with the good desires of others. And that when you do that, you shall gain the earth, the result. Now, the Greeks talk about it, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, like it's some sort of a passive, well, it's just going to come and fall on you, you're going to inherit it. No, this is a very active, by taking it into your work and your world, there's something that you earn. They will literally earn this reward, gain the earth.
Yeah, and I love, in addition, J.M. has a way of saying it that I really like as well, this idea of inheriting the earth. And he says, a new ripeness shall bring renewed inspiration, and confident strength will flow through them. And there is a restoration that I found in these practices that does bring, that idea of earth is, represented as the physical, right? Who we are in the physical, like the heaven and the earth, the consciousness and the physical kind of coming together. And it's almost, let's say what happened for me is I used to be, prior to doing these tools over the years, I used to be kind of like a duck, and someone described me that way when I was in business. Like, you're like a duck. You look really calm on the surface, but you're paddling like crazy, with all your insecurities underneath. And it's true. I was so insecure. I didn't have a strong bone in my body in terms of what I really thought. So I was very malleable, and I would try to get, people to like me. And that was a big deal for me. Spent a lot of time. I went into sales, and it's a common thing for people in sales too. It's like I made that a priority. And when people liked me, I got, so that process of unwinding that and getting to a place where no longer was I kind of this foreigner in my body feeling anxious and uncomfortable, but suddenly I, quote unquote, inherited the earth. There was this new ripeness. There was this settling in, right? There was this groundedness. And from that, confidence started to flow over time, and I became more aware of what my secondary purpose was. And that's key, because I remember the first time I did the secondary purpose exercise with you in 2012 down in Florida.
Right.
There was I still remember eating that juicy grapefruit off the tree. There was a desire to get it right. Like, I got to do the secondary purpose, because the primary purpose everybody's got. So the secondary purpose, so what's mine? And I wanted to get it really perfect. But I was coming from the carbon-based mind. I was coming from this place of like, well, what's right? What do I, quote unquote, need and all that stuff. And over time, just doing these, my secondary purpose really shifted quite a bit. I moved out of technology. I moved into, caring more about supporting people and finding these tools and developing themselves into, the best life force that could come in their world, considering their family and friends and whatever it is that they touch, and became more of a priority for me. Like, well, there's nothing more interesting to me than seeing a human being fully live. So trust, if you've done the purpose exercise, trust, it might change as you do these Beatitudes. It might not change necessarily dramatically, but it could alter, even if it's just the intention from which it comes.
Yeah, my experience over the years is I suggested people carry the net result. And if anybody hasn't done the purpose workshop, the worksheet's pretty self-explanatory. If you just go to whyagain.org or through the app, you go to the page with links to the website, and you'll find the worksheet. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory, and the net result of that, I suggest that people carry that on a 3x5 card in their purse, their wallet, whatever, and every time they're going to do something important, they check it out. Is it in alignment with this primary and secondary purposes that I've established? And as we clean out carbon-based memory, if it's garbage, it's going to shift, like mega shift, in terms of what we perceive as our purpose. That's going to be, we're going to move out of the world game and into the game of what human life was really designed for. And for most people, that's a pretty major shift that happens.
And one of the things that we've experienced with Journey's Dream is we kind of have our vision of what the world looks like when there's no more mental illness. So in the beginning, we did these vision exercises, and we thought, oh, wow, we want, this practitioner database where people come and find, practitioners who believe in your full restoration to health. Like, that would be really cool. And we want this, app to do this, study of a scale of where someone is for that day and track it over time so people can have self-realization and stuff. And we had all these visions of dozens of things, and we felt discouraged in the beginning that we weren't able to do it fast enough or complete enough. And one of the things that happened one day is there was this experience of something that we had envisioned coming to us from another organization, and we knew we wanted to collaborate with others. But when we saw that, it's like, wait a minute. We didn't even have to build it. That essentially that divine force is moving through people who are willing, right, and ripe, for their inner world to be purified, and then carry something out into the outer world that's going to be really constructive. And we've seen that kind of thing happen at least 6-7 times already, and it'll probably grow magnificently over the years, because now we're more aware of, wait, just because we have it in our vision doesn't mean ours to do. It could be that just a revelation of something that's being created. So this goes back to the Lord's Prayer, where it's like, give us this day our daily bread. You know, to give me today what it is that I need most. And to surrender into that and trust, you know, the mind goal management system, that we will receive in that, you know, pure space the insights that we most need for today. And we don't need to worry about tomorrow. You know, we can create plans and things, but tomorrow will take care of tomorrow. Today, focus on what it is that's optimal right now. So that coming together is really interesting to me. It's magnificent to see.
Yeah, you trigger in me, you know, you recognize that there are several inventions, if you check patent offices, that appeared in several places around the globe, things being patented literally on the same day in different countries, just, you know, like light years apart from each other, no communication, but the same patent was given in 3 different countries the same day. When you realize there's definitely a different energy going on there. And the year you were at Heartland, do you remember, did we play the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon?
I don't remember the movie, no.
Okay. Well, you might have
played it, but I don't remember it.
Well, as you're speaking, you might want to look this up and just spend some time and listen to this piece of music. It's from the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, which is the story of St. Francis of Assisi. But if you look on YouTube, it's and Jeannie, I'll send you the link. You might want to just put it in the notes. But it's, if you look on YouTube and search for "If You Want Your Dream to Be," Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, and it's just a powerful piece. And basically what it says is, take your time, go slowly. Small beginnings, greater ends. That's powerful.
I wrote it down. I'll look that up after the show.
Yeah, cool. And I'm sending the link to Jeannie, so she'll have it. So let's take a look at our next Beatitude. Let's see, we're down to about 6 minutes. We can probably cover one more. And this one, the Greek says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, and they shall be filled." It's interesting to hear people, especially in the theological realm, talking about their righteous anger as though there was such a thing. I love what Einstein says about anger. It's found only in the bosom of fools. And yet many people think it's it's like their mainstay. It's what motivates them. It's what works for them, and they don't realize the compromise of intelligence that's there with that righteous anger. But in Aramaic, that Beatitude says, "You who hunger for," and the word in Aramaic is kenuta, and it's a mind structure, literally a tuv. Remember the tuv in the Beatitudes, the Creator plants in your mind neural structures. This is just a tuv. So what it's saying is the mind structure underlying the attitude, judgment, and behavior described by just and fair behavior between people. And you look at carbon-based memory, and so much is based on greed and fear and getting and possession and all of that. And this one says that ultimately what each of us needs to work with this carbon-based memory system is to cultivate literally mind structure that the first order of business is always just and fair, rather than the non-being mind's games of greed and fear and pain and trauma. And what the result is, in the Greek say, if you've got that righteousness, you shall be filled. In Aramaic, what it says, if that neural structure, if you're hungering for that neural structure and you get that activated, then it will become your possession. You'll attain it. How's that one impacted you, Mark?
So it's right on, and for me, one of the things that I experienced with this is when I saw the fruits of using the practice 1, 2, and 3, and saw it again and again and again, that hunger began to develop, right? That change in me shifted from, okay, this is something nice to do when I'm in pain, to, no, this is something that is a way of life. In the Hebrew, I wouldn't be able to pronounce the name correctly, but I think it's Sadia, is one who follows the correct path, the path of God, or etc., which might sound a little close to righteousness rather than the Aramaic. But one of the things that I found is that there is this desire that births forth for what it is that's occurring. And for me, I had this insight that came periodically that would kind of almost give me a glimpse of the next state, right? This next state of, and I failed a lot. I would get an insight to do something in the world that would have been really effective for me. And I got the insight, but I had fear and wouldn't necessarily always follow it. And then I would see that, that would have been a good insight to follow. And so that created even more hunger.
You've got 1 minute.
Go back and do more of the Beatitudes. Yes, I'll wrap up. Maybe more of the Beatitudes and keep going to refine. But there's an inner and an outer. There's two things. One is to see it in others, as you mentioned, and the other is to really hunger for it in us. Because for me, when I went to me first and clarified that, then it made it easier for me to see it in others.
Right, and these mind structures, as you're developing them, it's good to recognize that they can be quite fragile. If you remember the first time you went into French class or German class or Spanish class, whatever it was in school, and they spoke in that language, you went, what do you even, that means nothing. And then, after three weeks in class, it was a certain, I can say oui, merci, but it's fragile, collapses easily, and ongoing connected work is what makes those mind structures strong. And we are down to the last second, so it's going to cut us off. And just thank you. And Mark, if it works tomorrow, maybe we can continue the conversation.